Hey everyone, it's Mike and John here again from Hatch Duo. Mike, today's a
Hey,
little special, right?
it is a little special, and it's a topic that we haven't talked about much. We have a special guest here with us today.
Terry Arbaugh, who is the Chief Commercial Officer of SEACOMP, a contract manufacturer based in San Diego with multiple factories overseas and here onshore. Terry, do you mind just letting everyone know who you are and introducing yourself and maybe how you kind of know Hatch Duo?
Yeah, absolutely. Terry Arbaugh, Chief Commercial Officer with SEACOMP. We are an electronics manufacturer based here in San Diego with factories in China and now in Tijuana, Mexico. I got connected with Hatch Duo, I think, originally through Clubhouse. So
That's right.
That's right.
That's right.
when Clubhouse was a thing during the pandemic, I was hosting a weekly hardware room and I got connected with April.
Yep.
Yep. April is everywhere.
Yeah, April's everywhere too. Yeah. Pretty small world that we live in, right? So
Yeah.
this hardware world. But yeah, so I think April came a few times to the Clubhouse room and would add some value as well. So I think that's how it started. And then we started exploring further ways to work together. So it's been a few years now. So
Yep.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's been awesome.
All right. So, starting with the introduction, right? So, Terry, could you tell us a little bit about what are contract manufacturers and what are their roles in product development? I know that Hatch Duo, we typically work with a lot of contract manufacturers, both early on in our product development process on the front end. We like to get them involved as early as possible, just to get those conversations started. And then midway and towards the end of our product development cycle, we like to bring on those contract manufacturers and suppliers as a way to begin discussions, initiate discussions with tooling, especially for plastic injection molding. So could you tell us a little bit about, what's their roles, or what is SEACOMP, and who is SEACOMP?
yeah, wow, it's a great and it's a loaded question. So we are a contract manufacturer. We also do product development engineering, but we only do engineering for products that we're going to manufacture. So you couldn't, hire us like a design firm just to get a package of files to take somewhere else to get built. So we do that intentionally because our team is designing only for our equipment, our people, our processes, using our approved vendor list. So we try to make that design to production seamless, right? And so I think the answer to what is a contract manufacturer, really somebody's going to help you scale production, right? For what Hatch Duo does and does so well is all the early stage, what is the product going to be? How is it going to impact the user? What purpose does it serve? What is it going to look and feel like? What is that user experience going to be like? You do all of those things, and how you described it, Mike, about how you start transitioning, working with a manufacturer a little bit later in your process. That's the perfect way to do it. We like to get involved when there's the design for manufacturing, the DFM phase. So if you're taking something that you've designed, can it be manufacturable, or what tweaks could we suggest you make to make our quality control better, our cost better? Those sort of interactions later in your process are perfect. Not everybody operates that way.
Yeah, that's really good insight, Terry. I think a question I think our audience would have too, and the question we get a lot here at Hatch Duo is, at what point in a customer's product lifecycle journey would it be appropriate to initiate conversations with a CM or contract manufacturer like yourselves?
Yeah, another really good question with a lot of answers. This hardware is complex, and I'm also a sales guy, so I kind of talk. So those two things together are kind of leading to some long answers. So just get ready.
I'm sure our listeners would love to hear it.
Yeah.
If you're ready to start scaling production. So again, if you're designing, you're making some prototypes, maybe you're making a few or making 10, at some point you're going to get to a point where you couldn't make that many units with your team in your garage, right? So you have to bring on a manufacturer. I think one of the most important things is finding the right size fit for what your manufacturing effort is. If you need 100 or a few hundred, that could be a prototype or a low volume manufacturing run, as opposed to, hey, I've built a few units and I think we're going to get to tens of thousands of units later. I'm ready to go to a manufacturer. It's like, hold on, right? I think there's still a lot of steps you need to take. You need to build some small runs. We go through a process, EVT, DVT, PVT is a really common manufacturing process for engineering validation, for design validation, and for process validation to make sure the product is designed appropriately and the process to make that product is also designed appropriately to lead to a high quality output consistently over time in production. So if you haven't gone through the proper steps, I would generally say you're not quite ready to go to a manufacturer. You can skip some of those steps at times if you've got some experience behind you. If you've done this before and kind of know what those pitfalls are, some people can jump the queue a little bit. The other thing I would say to caution some people that will try to go to a manufacturer too early. A lot of manufacturers can help you with the DFM. They can help you get to production even though you're not quite ready. And they may not always charge you for those sort of services. They may say, oh, yeah, we'll help you out. We'll take care of this part. Mm-hmm. It's really helpful if you're a cash-strapped startup. That sounds amazing up until the point where they tell you that the design files and everything else that they're manufacturing are actually theirs now, not yours.
Right.
So a lot of people accidentally, because they try to get to a manufacturer too early or they don't know all the steps, sometimes kind of, I always say it's an IP fumble. It's like not really theft as much, right? They're telling you that they're going to do it. They're not charging you for it. They're not really openly telling you that they believe that product, those files are theirs. But that's usually what can happen quite often if you try to go too early. So I would just be really careful trying to go too early to a manufacturer.
Got it.
Yeah.
That's great advice.
Yeah. To put things into context, and some of our listeners, if they're building a piece of hardware or an assembly for the first time, what are some of the first steps in finding a good and reliable contract manufacturer? What are some things that they should consider, look for, evaluate, decision factors, if you would?
Yeah, a lot of them. I mentioned a little bit the fit in terms of a few things. So does this manufacturer support the size of business that I am and that my product will produce? So if I'm looking for somebody who can make 5,000 units of something, that's going to be a different manufacturer than somebody who's going to make 500,000 units of something, right? So you don't want to go to the 500,000 piece person and then only take them 5,000 pieces. They're not going to be really excited about your business, right? So I think the fit is really important. The technology fit is also important. Is the manufacturer experienced with the types of technologies you're using, with the types of components or materials or processes that would take to make your product? What are their quality control standards? Do those meet what your customer expectations are for your product? So making sure you have that sort of a fit is really important. One thing that I think is really, really critical is understanding who you're going to be working with from the manufacturer's team. The project manager or your point of contact. Are they responsive? Is the English communication good, or the language communication in whatever language you're communicating in, is it appropriate? Quite often you'll have some manufacturers where maybe the owner or the top level executives were schooled in the US or in Europe or somewhere else where they speak really good English, if we just use English as the example. But the team that you might ultimately get passed off to does not communicate as well. Do they understand your timeline, your schedule, your budget? Do they understand the decision points that they need to make to try to help you accomplish your goals? Like that communication and that understanding when you're starting a manufacturing process that's going to be 6, 9, 12 months just to get from the initial engagement to shipping a product. If that communication isn't great, it's a really, really painful process. So I think that is something really important to find.
Yeah, I think that's super important because a lot of stuff does get lost in translation, and especially when you're dealing with tolerances and things like that. I mean, that's a big deal, right? You can't redo tooling. One question I had is, a lot of our clients, they come at different stages, anywhere from startups to larger enterprises. What exactly do you need to be able to engage a manufacturer? Because I think this is a pretend, it's someone who, this is their first time in hardware, and it's like, do I need drawings, sketches? Do I need CAD files? Do I need tolerance drawings? Like, what do they need? And does that answer vary depending on the type of manufacturer?
The answer always varies. But yeah, I would say if we separate design from manufacturing, right? So we happen to do both. A lot of manufacturers are just manufacturers. They're going to build something, a package that you give them. So in that case, generally a bill of materials, a the CAD files, doesn't have to be native, but even a step file or something, right, would be great. A color material finish requirements is really, really helpful to quote the proper parts. If you have Gerber files, if you have the PCB files that actually need to be made, if you have programming and test, at the very least, a estimated amount of time. If you think it's going to take 2 minutes, a 2-minute test cycle for each of these units, that is an important piece of information for a manufacturer to be able to provide a quote around, because our calculation is going to be how many units can we make per hour, and how many people do we need to make that many units per hour. So we're going to calculate the labor and the overhead and the equipment usage and all of that to get to a quote. So having all of those files well defined at least allows us to provide a pretty accurate quote. Now, if you add some of the engineering side in, if you're not fully all the way ready to have a manufacturable product and you add some of the engineering side in, we like to start with a product requirements document.
Yep.
Right, is really where we go. And then the industrial design. We don't do industrial design. That's why, a company like Hatch Duo is such a great partner for us, because your inputs to us are a perfect starting point. Again, color, material, finish.
Mm-hmm.
Where does this product have to operate? Does it have to be waterproof, for example? Does it live outside? Do we need to take UV into account? Does it need to be drop tested? How many, if it's going to be a handheld and it's going to be used heavy, do we need to test button presses? Do we need to test that the pad printing doesn't smudge off after usage? All of the factors that go into the environment that the product is going to be operated in, that being laid out, plus your volumes. Right. Volume is your quantities are a really big deal for quoting. We get the component pricing, the component and material pricing is affected by your volume. And also, if we were building 10,000 units, for example, at one shot, it would be cheaper for us to set up and build 10,000 units at one shot than it would be to build 1,000 units 10 different times.
Yeah. Is that because of the setup costs?
Yeah, setup costs, right? A lot of people don't understand if you have a complex printed circuit board assembly, so the PCBA where the electronics go, it could take hours to set up and run boards, right? So we have a lot of products that have hundreds of component placements, right? And they have some really complex component placements, and it could be a half a day just setting up and loading the machine to run those boards. So if you have to do that repeatedly, as opposed to you do it once, you validate it, you run a bunch of boards and you tear it down, I can offer you a lower cost for doing that once instead of doing that 10 times. So those sort of variables, will come into play when you start engaging with the manufacturer to get your pricing estimates.
Yeah. So on that point, like you mentioned something before about you guys have a factory now in Mexico, and congratulations on that. We've talked privately offline about this, but we do want to jump into some advice for some of the audience in a little bit. But I think like a common question for us is, can you maybe talk about, from your perspective, Terry, contract manufacturing onshore and offshore, like what that perspective or advice from import duty taxes, and we're getting into it with, logistics and stuff. Can you maybe talk a little bit about that? Because, there's obviously some things going on with challenges with tensions overseas and
trade wars.
And how maybe like an onshore factory like yours would be really beneficial for, clients like ours.
Yeah, I talk about this every day, as you might imagine. So, we're a U.S. entity operating 2 factories, one in Dongguan, China, one in Tijuana, Mexico. So all of our customers that we're dealing with have contracts with the U.S. entity, but then we're figuring out where the manufacturing is going to take place. Yeah. SEACOMP is agnostic. We don't care where you would prefer us to build it. We will provide options. Now, like you mentioned, the biggest consideration that really started a lot of this is the tariffs that were put in place 5-6 years ago. Yeah. So a lot of the products that we make, most of the products that we make in the electronics world, and we manufacture industrial, medical, and consumer products, most of them are going to be hit with a 25% import tariff coming into the U.S. Right? So that's, you have the import fees, you have the freight cost, either your air shipping, or even if you're shipping via ocean, which is much cheaper, then you're adding 4 to 6 weeks transit time, right? So there's a lot of considerations to make when you're manufacturing in China. Now, China, from a cost standpoint for the production, is lower. The amount of skilled labor in China is just better than anywhere in the world for the types of products that we make, and the supply base being local is a huge advantage. Every single component you can imagine is within 10 miles of our factory in in China. So there's a lot of advantages there, but obviously
Sure.
from a cost standpoint, there is some disadvantages.
Okay.
What Mexico brings is Mexico generally, as a high level rule, that again, variables in terms of what are your components, how much labor does it take, what is the cost, what is the volume. Generally, Mexico is about 15 to 18% more expensive for a finished good than China is. Just as a general rule, 15 to 18% higher unit cost. But then you get to import that into the US without the 25% tariff. There is no tariff for importing from Mexico.
Yep.
Provided that you've achieved the substantial transformation. So you can buy components and materials from China, for example, turn them into a finished good in Mexico, and then you import under a different tariff classification. So there is no import tariff for that finished good coming into the US. So even if it's 18% more expensive and you don't have a 25% tariff and a shipping cost and time, your total cost of ownership is less for the end customer. So
That's interesting.
those are the types of things we're currently talking about and evaluating, and our grand opening is next week in Tijuana, and we're really excited about it.
Yeah. So for our audience, definitely check that out. Check out SEACOMP's new factory. And, I know a lot of you are asking about, onshore versus, offshore. What are some onshore options? And, SEACOMP's Mexico factory is one of them. So there you go.
Earlier you mentioned, so talking about some of the tips and tricks or advice that you might have for someone who's searching or already working with a contract manufacturer. Earlier you touched upon, working files, for example. If you're working with a contract manufacturer who's going to do the DFM, at that point, the contract manufacturer owns the files. So that was one of the things you mentioned. Is there any other pitfalls that you think could be avoided when working directly with CM?
Yeah, and I would just clarifying how we operate. For example, if we have a customer that gives us some design files and we take a look at, and we have some recommendations for them to change a wall thickness or a draft angle or something, we will send that back in a PowerPoint and, circle and point to and comment on what we think the change should be.
Yeah.
Our customer remains the design authority. So we're asking them to make those changes in their design. So there's just one owner of the design. It doesn't get loose.
Okay.
And if they want us to make those changes, then generally contractually, we will say, all right, we're going to quote you this. This is what it's going to take. The output of that is, you ultimately own these files. So it's a really clear, documented contractual arrangement. We, SEACOMP, are not trying to take control of anybody's IP or work product, right? So we operate that way. Not everybody is as transparent again. So that is one piece of advice. Gosh, I think really, really clearly defining the reasons behind your goals, what you're asking to do. A lot of the factories or manufacturers generally are going to try to get you to the lowest cost.
Mm-hmm.
So you hear a lot, but quite often getting to the lowest cost, if without any other context around, quality requirements or environment that it's going to live in or anything else, you can make some changes that ultimately kind of go against the core intent of the design from a quality standpoint or anything else. So really making sure that your manufacturing partner understands what you are trying to accomplish, who your users are, how important is the premium brand experience for you to maintain, not just making cost changes, but maybe suggesting and understanding trade-offs. And having that conversation. So I think I always come back to communication. That communication and the understanding is really, really important. I'll give you just one. It's a silly example, but we'll have things like we have customers that we're dealing with, and my team is the customer-facing team. So sales, marketing, program management, like all the customer-facing activity rolls up to me here. So if things go south, I get the call, right? So, we'll have customers that have a trade show, or they have a Mother's Day or Christmas, right? There is something that is so critical. They're spending all this time and money and effort to try to hit this certain date. And the team overseas in China, for example, might say, well, we have to get a special truck, so we can ship the product from China to Hong Kong to meet that date. And I don't know if they'd want to pay for that special truck. And you'd say, well, okay, this is really, really important. How much is it? Mm-hmm. And give you a figure that translates into like $72 American, right? And you're going, well, yes. They're spending hundreds of thousands, and they have so much riding on this one event. But culturally, that's a lot of money, and they're really trying to save you, right? I think the intention always comes from a really good place.
Right. The context.
Sometimes just the cultural mismatch or that context is really important. And there's 100 of those things that happen where they're little misses, and it might cost you a day here or a week there. And every one of those little things that adds up over the course of a 6 or 9 or 12 month process, can ultimately be really frustrating. And so that communication, that partnership is really key.
Okay.
Yeah. Speaking of culture, I think whenever you're working with offshore manufacturers, from some of the obstacles that we've encountered in the past were, cultural holidays that are observed in other countries, right? They can be out of the factory for up to a month at a time, especially during Chinese New Year. So those are like one of the things that we've learned to try to warn our customers about, or forewarn if they're trying to engage with a contract manufacturer, like in Q1 or at the end of Q4 during the year. Anything else you want to talk about, John?
No, I mean, Terry, thanks so much for taking the time to chat with us. Is there anything that we may have missed, or any exciting developments that SEACOMP has in the near future that you want to let our audience know about?
Yeah, so for Mexico is the most exciting thing we have going, and it's a lot of work, obviously, for a lot of us. So with the grand opening next week, the surface mount is in, assembly is in, we're adding injection molding. So kind of the next phase of the factory in Tijuana will be the injection molding phase, and that'll be the second half of the year. So basically by the end of the year, we'll have a very similar service portfolio that we can offer out of Tijuana that we do currently in China. So, SMT, injection molding, and then full box build assemblies. We've got our ISO 1345 certification coming online next month for Tijuana. And just the expansion of that facility is the most exciting thing we've got going on. So I can't see beyond that right now.
Okay. Well, still, you guys heard it. It's super exciting. I will definitely be sending you some of our clients that are looking for onshore. I think that's a great option for them.
Yeah.
But other than that, man, Terry, thanks so much. This has been long overdue. Thanks so much for taking the time to do this with us.
No problem. I was gonna thank you for having me on and trusting you to be your first guests.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, you're great to have, and you're such a natural. And I think all the stuff, the tips that you gave were actually very valuable nuggets for our audience.
There's a lot of gold in this video, so I hope our audience and our viewers can take a lot of this as learning and advice as they pursue their entrepreneurial journey in hardware development.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us. If you like this video, don't forget to subscribe and comment down below.
Turn on your notification bell for new releases.
And feel free to comment if you want to ask Terry some questions. Feel free to comment, and his information for contact or for SEACOMP will also be put in the show notes.
Let's hatch awesome.